All right, good morning, everyone. We're about to get started. Just give a minute or two for everyone to join. But why don't we kick it off and good morning? Welcome to our 123 webinar series with today's topic, cybersecurity. I'm your host, Paul Cooney, president of Shamrock Consulting Group, your trusted technology partner for unbiased advice, analysis, and cost savings for over a decade. Today's speakers are Tim Fogarty, Director of Enterprise, and Ben Ferguson, EVP and Solution Architect. The agenda of our 123 series is to give you one topic over 20 minutes with 3 key takeaways or insights to help your businesses through research and real-life examples. One of our special examples today will be a live hack from Ben Ferguson, so today should be a very interesting and potentially scary webinar. If you've never seen a hack, some of you have, you will today. And luckily, Ben's a nice guy, and this is just for display purposes. If you have any questions throughout the session, please hit the question button at the bottom, and we'll answer those at the end. So here is why cybersecurity is especially topical today. The FBI has reported the largest ever increase in cybercrime in any of our lifetimes. The last few months have seen a 400% increase in cybercrime. So if this was not on your mind before, and for some of you it has, but if not, I'm guessing it surely is now. Most of this is due to opportunism and activities like using phishing and spear phishing tactics to do things like drive people to fake COVID-19 alerts or websites or emails that are malicious. Many people are now working from home, which can have weakened security, which just makes malicious entry easier, which we'll demonstrate in our hacking lab today. I'm now going to hand it over to Ben and Tim, and as always, we're going to kick things off with a quick quiz. Tim Fogarty, I believe you have the quiz of the day, so want to please state the question?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Paul. All right, now time for our Shamrock's 123 quiz question of the day. And before we read it off, today's quiz winners will receive a $50 Amazon gift card. So here is the question. In what year was the first ever recorded hack? Is it A, 1903, B, 1931, C, 1962, or D, 1971? Give you a few seconds here.
Do, 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 do.
Should we really think about this?
All right.
All right, a few more seconds here, and pencils down. All right, so some of you may have chosen D, 1971, which was Don Draper's freak attack, and it is also we'll know if that you chose that because it's the first result that pops up if you try and Google the answer, cheaters. So if you chose D, that is wrong. The correct answer is actually A, 1903. Yeah, 1903. So Guglielmo Marconi attempted to transmit the first ever message via a wireless broadcasting technology using the same delivery type method as the telegraph. So he tried to send the message, but over, the apparatus all of a sudden began to mysteriously just tap out RATS, rats, over and over again. So, obviously that goes without saying that this was not the message Marconi had originally intended to send. But it all ties into our whole message today. And this was the first of many hacking attempts, right, to appear in history. Now we fast forward to more than a century later, and even with all the incredible advances we've had in technology, we still are facing similar problems today, right? So let's go ahead and just dive in and talk about, some common hacking techniques we're seeing out there, right? So in general, from a high level, when most people think of hacking, they think of what? They think of malware, right? Over the years, businesses have spent so much time, effort, and just countless dollars protecting their organizations, from malware. But like always, and they're evolving, hackers, they're resilient creatures, so they always are finding new ways and new methods. For one, hackers now are using programs like Shelter and Veil to cloak their malware through encryption algorithms, okay? Second, hackers are using, more advanced tactics and strategies to breach the networks without malware, right? So those are harder to prevent and actually catch. And as you can see here, in 2018, about 60% of our attacks used malware. But we go to fast forward to year 2019, it's starting to trend a little more towards malware-free breaches, right? As you can see up there. Now, the reason being is the most sophisticated hackers, are targeting North American businesses by using some very advanced and somewhat new techniques. For instance, we look at 73% of the attacks that have resulted in breaches in North America, they didn't use any malware at all, right? So very tough to detect, prevent, really scary stuff, okay? So Ben, speaking of some of these things and, kind of what's out there, why don't you talk about some modern methods and, some things that you're seeing and people, should be on the lookout for?
Absolutely, Tim. Thanks. So Skynet's becoming sentient. So if you look at a MITRE attack, so MITRE is probably our favorite organization that really tracks what hacker tools and techniques that hackers are using out in the wild. And so, they built this framework that shows all the different ways that they attack, and it's really cool to look at. And so we really use the MITRE attack framework to analyze these tactics and techniques. So first off, you see that machine learning is not just used by our top tech companies. Hackers are using machine learning techniques as well. They're also using advanced scripts and using what we call live off the land tools, which is modules like command line interface and PowerShell, which are your own computer's trusted administrative tools, and they're using them against your computer. And I'm actually going to demonstrate some of that today. Now let's look at the anatomy of a breach. This is a typical breach, and we pulled a lot of this data from IBM. So you'll see hackers spend, days to months doing reconnaissance or researching their targets, but it's only minutes to hours of actual hands-on keyboard for them to gain initial access to a machine. In fact, Russian Federation hackers average only 18 minutes of hands-on keyboard to crack initial access to systems, which is pretty scary. So once access is gained, they're exploring files, folders, escalating privileges, moving laterally, and looking to find the big prizes on your network. So if you get hit with ransomware, you know it right away. Black screen of death, here's the link to pay us in Bitcoin. And I hope nobody on the call has experienced that, but I think everybody at this point knows somebody who has. But sometimes hackers have other motives beyond just ransomware getting money extortion. It could be exfiltration, botnet recruitment, or just owning everything for notoriety on the dark web. The scary part is, on average, it's taking businesses 206 days to identify the breach, and then an additional 108 days to remediate and contain it for a 314-day time to kill timeline, which is just way too long. It's 2020, people. We need to do better. So I need to jump into the lab, but I'm going to hand this over to Tim real quick, and he's going to talk about the cost of breaches.
Thanks, Ben. And yeah, so let's go back about a decade ago. And what we look at, the average cost of a breach 10 years ago was just over $1 million per breach, right? But due to the widespread of, ransomware, big game hunting, and then you look at government fines from GDPR and CCPA, that number has ballooned to almost $14 million per breach. From $1 million per breach to almost $14 million. Crazy, crazy jump. All right, looks like we're about ready to send it to Ben Ferguson for his live hacking demo. Real quick, I also want to apologize in advance if there's any choppiness. I'm also going to just blame that on GoPro and Zoom. So there you go. All right, we're going to send it over to Ben Ferguson for the hacking demo.
Ready to rock and roll. All right, so right here, I run VMware Fusion on my workstation, and this is the hacker machine. I'm running the latest version of Kali Linux on this one. Now here are our victim machines. So this right here is Metasploitable 2. It's a Ubuntu purposely vulnerable machine for hacking practice, but it really represents any sort of laptop or tablet or smart home device that you might have at your house. A lot of these things have a ton of vulnerabilities because most people don't keep up to date with their patches and don't have any good security tools loaded on those things. So those are extremely vulnerable, and hackers take advantage all the time. Worse, if you have a teenager in your house that goes to some bad websites, they might pick up a few critters along the way. And when you're working from home, here's your corporate workstation. Pristine, probably has their patches updated as much as possible, and probably has some good security tools. But what we're finding is a lot of the security of organizations is predicated being on the location behind a firewall. When you're working from home, even over a VPN, those security features break down pretty quickly, and I'm going to show you how. So, hackers are exploiting vulnerable machines at your house, and anyone who has, a bunch of end users working from home, they have machines that have been owned by hackers at their house, guaranteed. And the issue is, if they're sitting on the same Wi-Fi network as those vulnerable machines, hackers are always looking at like ARP caches and running Nmap scans of the network to find other devices they can own, recruit to their botnet, or even worse, which would be gain access to a corporate network through a machine that they can compromise. I'm going to show you exactly how they do that. So, Metasploitable 2, lots of vulnerabilities to exploit, but I'm going to do a remote code execution using the Java vulnerability loaded on it. So, let's come up here. We use exploit multi-miss, Java, my server. All right. So let's take a look at our options here. All right, so I've set my HTTP delay, my target host, my local host, and that's it. So pretty easy. Let's get going on this. So I'm going to set my local host to my machine, 192.168.5.128. Confirm that's right. Yep. Now I'm going to set my HTTP delay to 100, just as really safe. I'm going to set my R host to the machine I'm going to be attacking, 192.168.5.131. Yes. And let's take a look at the payloads here that we can hit it with. So I want to get an interpreter shell, and I'm going to use reverse TCP. So let's set my payload to, I'm going to write to Java interpreter reverse TCP. All right. Now, I have to set my server host. It's live. I guarantee I'm going to do 5 things wrong. Bear with me. 192.168.5.128. That's my machine. Let's give this a try and hit the exploit button. Fingers crossed. All right. If I get a good session, let's check background and see what sessions I've got. Bingo. Session 1, we're in Metasploitable, so I'm going to interact with session 1. Let's see if I can get shell access here. Boom. So now I have shell access here. I totally own this machine. I can do all types of crazy stuff. So I'm going to run an Nmap scan of the whole network. /24. Hopefully my session doesn't die doing that. So this takes a couple seconds, but so what I'm doing is I'm owning this machine. So now I'm running an Nmap scan, which is a scan of all devices on the network, proxying it through this machine to see what else is there that I can find that I could hack. All right, still working on it. Okay, so interesting ports on 192.168.5.133. That's this machine here, the corporate workstation. And I can see Microsoft DS, so I know it's a Windows machine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move laterally and attack that machine. So I'm going to use, it's not brand new, but Eternal Romance. I'm sure most companies have patched for it already. But still, it was a huge vulnerability. And the thing with 0 days is that hackers know about them well before they're patched. So there's always that lapse. And so presumably there's going to be new 0 days coming out all the time. They're going to affect the machines on your network. And when they're, sitting right next to extremely vulnerable machines on the network, that creates a really bad scenario for a lot of, look, my interpreter session died, but I've already done it. I usually throw a rootkit on to keep persistence on this, because that's what hackers are going to do. But I don't think I have time for that anyway in this short demo. So I know it's a Microsoft machine. I have its IP address. Let's hack it now. So I'm going to use the Eternal Romance exploit. Windows SMB. It's MS17 PSExec. So that is right. I believe it is. Otherwise, I would have said error, not found. Let's take a look at my options here. All right, so pretty similar hack. I'm going to actually take a look at what payloads we have. We have 208 payloads to hit this with, so many choices. I'm going to do a Windows interpreter shell, again using reverse TCP because that's what I'm good at. So let's set my payload to Windows. Is it interpreter? Let's reverse TCP. No error. Okay, good so far. So I'm going to set my local host to my Kali machine, 68.5.128, and I will set my R host, my victim host, 192.168.5.133, and I'm going to set my listen port to 444. All right. Now we hit the magic button, exploit, fingers crossed. Look at that. Already got an interpreter shell with this system. So it was that easy, that quick. So there's a lot of different things that you can do here. You can, record their microphone, open up their web camera. I can play a WAV file, get system. So I'm going to elevate my privileges. So let's get system. Boom. Now I own this machine. Usually at this point I throw in a rootkit so I have persistent access to it. But again, we're not going to do that. It will take too long for the demo. So I'm going to do a hash dump. And right here, I have administrator passwords for this machine. What I do is I copy and paste this into a text file and run it through a password cracker that's going to sort out those password hashes and give me their passwords for all their Windows logins. So the problem is a lot of people reuse their username and passwords, so I can start screen recording, seeing every single application they interact with. Sometimes I can see them enter their password, the number of characters it is, all types of crazy stuff. And if they're reusing passwords, then that's really easy. I could also set up port forwarding and start doing man-in-the-middle attacks with social engineering. They try and log into their G Suite. Boom, I steal their credentials there. They try and, I can serve them up a social engineering to make them log into Office 365 if that's what they're using. Grab their credentials right there. Lots of scary things I can do with them. So what else do I want to do? So I stole their passwords. I'm now into the machine. Generally, I throw in a rootkit, but let's do a screenshot just for good measure. All right, screenshot saved to root NVU. Whatever it is. I have my root folder open. And I have the screenshot of their desktop. So, anyways, tip of the day, when you're working from home, Don't use the same SSID on your Wi-Fi as the rest of the devices. Create an independent one. It makes it a little harder for you to hack, and get some great security tools to make sure that you guys are protected. So we're going to jump back into the conference room and continue with the webinar.
All right. Well, as Samuel Jackson from Pulp Fiction said, check out the big brain on Ben. Nice work, man. Hacking 2 computers in under 10 minutes. That's faster than the average Russian hacker, my friend. Let's wait for Ben to get back from his lab. All right. Hey, that was pretty awesome. Why don't you do us a favor, Ben, and break down, kind of peel back the onion, show us all kind of what you just did there.
Here's the MITRE ATT&CK framework view of tactics and techniques. And here's the ones I use. So I was able to do, obviously, like a system and user discovery for the lateral movement from the Metasploitable 2 to the Windows machine. I used a process memory injection, as you might have saw, for privilege escalation on the machine, and all of this was done over command line and shell. So, very comparable to a lot of modern attacks. So this is where security tools and modules really come into play. So let's assume it's impossible to be 100% like completely impervious from a hack attack. But if you know how hackers are attacking, you can introduce security tools and modules that make it each step as difficult as possible. So with that, I think we're pretty much done. So now let's jump into our 3 key takeaways. Tim, why don't you kick off numero uno?
Yep. Takeaway number 1 is cybercrime is growing and the online world is getting much more dangerous. In the last 3 months, we've seen the largest uptick in cybercrime in any of our lifetimes. And spoiler alert, it's only going to get worse.
A little doom and gloom for your Wednesday there. So key takeaway number 2. So build out your security arsenal and policies. So as I showed you, a quick and easy measure is get a different SSID for your home Wi-Fi for all your users. It costs you $0. So that's the free tip of the day. On top of that, we really recommend companies moving towards a zero trust framework. And with remote access comes a zero trust framework, next gen VPN or no VPN. Not like the old school tools. These are a lot more advanced and secure in the way that they work. Build out your arsenal for defense, right? So every module added makes a hacker's life more difficult. In 2020, it's all about being harder to hack than the next guy is your best defense. And control your devices out in the field. Think about things like shadow IT, right? So if your end users are able to just load any application on their computer that they want, presumably those folks are not keeping the patches up to date, so that introduces new vulnerabilities to your network. So do as much as you can to control the host firewalls, and eliminate shadow IT. Number 3, build out your response playbook and put it to the test. So this includes vulnerability scanning early and often, increasing your patch cadence. So if you think about as new 0 days come out, the faster you can patch them, the lower your chances are of getting hacked. Obviously, it's not perfect because hackers know about 0 days before they're patched, but the best you can do to shorten those windows, the better off you're going to be. Identify breaches faster. Don't take 206 days to identify a breach. Try and get hands on or eyes on screen as they're happening, and that requires more advanced tool sets. Network contain hosts that have been compromised. Control the blast radius when things get compromised. And build out your remediation playbook. Don't wait for things to happen. Be proactive. And of course, put all these policies and procedures to the test. A lot of companies just do small scoped pen tests once a year for compliance reasons. We think, in this day and age, you have to go well above and beyond that. So full scope pen tests, minimum once a year, but also look at, red team, blue team, and purple team operations. And that's not just putting your tools and procedures to the test, it's putting your team to the test for handling a breach situation. So with that being said, Tim, you want to give us a quick summary of all the fine facts we learned today?
Absolutely. So to summarize our 3 key takeaways for today, number 1, the online world is getting much more dangerous. Number 2, build out your security arsenal and your policies. And number 3, build that response playbook and put it all to the test, right? All right, so that'll do it for today. I want to thank everyone for your time, and we really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Shamrock's ONE-20-THREE series on cybersecurity. Myself, Ben Ferguson, and Paul Cooney want to thank you. Also, if you guys would like to stay on a little longer, we're going to have some Q&A for some questions we had come through for Ben Ferguson to answer. And we will, on top of that, be emailing out all of the winners from the quiz question today later on this afternoon. So I'll send it back to Ben for the Q&A, and I want to thank everyone again for your time today.
Excellent. Paul, if we had any questions come through?
Yeah, so looking at the chat, the private chat, I have a few questions. First question for you, Ben, is it says, how do you recommend scoping a pen test? How do you recommend scoping a penetration test?
Yeah, so that's just an hour-long response, but great question nonetheless. So pen tests. Not all pen tests are created equal. That's something that we've found out over the last few years. So really the scope should be around vulnerability scans, looking at network configurations, and really combining that with a red team approach of having people expose those weaknesses and then see how much privilege escalation or lateral movement can be done. And so you want to do as full scope as possible, because your weakest link, something that's generally not going to be included in a standard pen test, can be the downfall of your network. So really as large a scope as possible. And we also like to see bringing in a red team, blue team, or purple team approach to those pen tests to make it more real life and also test your team. Next question, Paul.
Well, there's 2 other questions. Since you mentioned red, blue, purple, the question was, Ben, you mentioned red, blue, purple teaming, and what is that? I haven't heard of that before.
Oh, okay. So for those who don't know, so red team is a simulation where a third-party pen tester will attempt to breach your network and do as much damage as they can. There's white box and black box versions of this. A white box, they know they've already done the full pen test, expose all the vulnerabilities, and then they try and attack those. A black box is where they know nothing about your network, they just try and hack you. Blue team is the team within your organization or your outsourced managed security service provider. That's them going through these measures and actively trying to protect your network. And then a purple team approach is where you're working with your pen tester or MSSP, and they're helping you with both the offensive and the defensive approach.
Okay, and I'm checking that. More question. I'll keep the chat open for a second, but it says, do you recommend eliminating split tunneling for remote VPN?
Yeah, we're getting some good ones. Let me think about that. The answer is, so split tunneling, it really depends. This time I'll define it. So for those of you who don't know, split tunneling is basically when a remote user is using a VPN, they're tunneling into the network for business applications, but web browsing, they're splitting off, so it's not going through the corporate network. So obviously that can be a downfall. So a lot of companies do that so that they're not getting, a lot of companies have to do that during the shelter in place because they just couldn't handle that much VPN traffic. So that was sort of a reactionary measure. But the downfall with that is if they're open up to the internet, you're not taking advantage of the corporate, web content filtering and IDS, IPS. So from a web vector. So, you know, short answer is split tunneling is probably a really bad idea. Long answer, you can build certain security features and, you know, things like cloud-based firewalls and cloud-based proxies to shore that up, that eliminate that bottleneck issue. But so short answer is depends, but usually it's a good idea to not split tunnel. Any other questions come through? Those were good ones.
Nope, we had those.
Brain busters there.
Yeah, those were the three that we had. I think that that does it for today.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time and attention and great questions. Hopefully I have some winners getting $50 Amazon cards. So any inquiries that you have or follow-ups, please direct them to ryan.reeves@shamrockconsulting.com. Feel free to call us anytime, 310-955-1600. And stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be, I think, next week or the week after. It is Remote Workforce Productivity Management. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.